Hello and welcome to the MBOM podcast, where you'll learn to master the business of yoga. MBOM is a proud part of the Wander Barn Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Amanda Kingsmith. I'm a 500-hour registered yoga teacher, a yoga business coach, and a total business geek. Here at MBOM, you'll learn everything you need to know to create a sustainable yoga business by learning from myself and guests from around the world about how they built their yoga businesses, and about how you too can become a successful yoga teacher, studio owner, and much more. All right, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of the MBOM podcast. I am so grateful and excited that you've decided to join me for today's episode of the show. Today on the podcast, I am super excited to be joined by Carol Baxter. Carol is a yoga teacher as well as the founder of Glow Yoga, which is based in Ontario, Canada. And on this episode of the podcast, Carol and I dive into how she first got into yoga, what inspired her to become a yoga teacher, and how she's really been able to create Glow Yoga. So what inspired her to create the studio, what she's learned as a business owner over the last couple of years. And then we also talk about the pivot that she made over the last couple of months. As you know, we are in a global pandemic right now, and it's meant that everyone, studios and teachers alike, has had to take their teaching online. And Carol shares a little bit about what her and her team has done. And it's really interesting to hear how different yoga studios are handling the pandemic and, creating different programs and offerings for their students. So this is a really fun conversation. I hope that you guys enjoy it. And just before we get into the episode, just a quick word from our sponsor, OfferingTree. When you're a yoga teacher and you're trying to build your digital presence, it can be daunting, especially right now when you are trying to take your offerings online as fast as possible. OfferingTree set out to make creating your digital presence fun, easy, and affordable. With one account, you can create a website in minutes that has your schedule built right in. They also have email marketing tools to collect email addresses, send newsletters, and automated emails to your subscribers. It all works seamlessly together with one account and one subscription. Forget spending all your time and energy just trying to remember what account does what and what your login information is. On top of that, OfferingTree has an embedded scheduling feature, so if you already have a website that you love, you can use it for online payments and scheduling. They have also just announced that they now have Stripe integration so that people from Canada, the UK, Australia, and 30 plus countries can accept payments using OfferingTree. This is something that a lot of people have been asking for, and it is finally live. So that is super exciting. To learn more about what OfferingTree can do for your digital presence, visit offeringtree.com/MBOM. OfferingTree has been supporting MBOM for over a year now, and I not only love the product, but I also love the people. And OfferingTree is also providing special pricing for MBOM listeners. So be sure to visit offeringtree.com/MBOM to receive your discount. All right, now on to the episode. Carol, welcome to the podcast today. I'm super excited to have you here with me.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I am just excited to see where we take this conversation and to learn a little bit from you. And before we dive into, the meat and potatoes of your business, I'm curious if you can tell me a bit about your yoga journey and how you first got into yoga.
Absolutely. So I came into yoga. Oh my goodness. I would say it's like 14 years ago now, about 14 years. Seems like a long time. But I was working in a very stressful job. I was working in the corporate world for a good decade, and I was completely stressed out. So it just, something internally wasn't right for me, and my body was consistently showing me this, and it seemed to be with more and more aggression that I was not on the right path in what I was doing. So it just happened that I went to a yoga studio and tried a yoga class out. And I didn't know much about yoga. I didn't know anything about where it came from or its lineage or the spirituality that's connected to it. I just went into this random class and I felt pure elation through moving my body, connecting with my breath. And really, it's almost like a piece of me came back together through that class. So that's how my entire, past 14 years have been. It's been this doorway that opened that one day in that class, and I've taken many doors since then. But I'm so grateful that happened, because it showed me where I was meant to go.
Yeah, I love hearing that. That's such a beautiful story. And I'm curious for you, did you know you wanted to teach right away, or what was kind of the journey into deciding to become a yoga teacher?
I knew right away. I
That's
knew that I was going
awesome.
to
I
quit my
love that.
job. Yeah. Yeah, it's so rare, I think. Maybe, I'm not sure. Like, it sounds, too quick or too soon, but I just think that when you find that thing that you're meant to do, your dharma, something clicks inside of you, and then there's just no more questions. And for me, that's how it felt. I knew that I was going to continue coming to the studio. I could see myself teaching it someday. And it rolled from there. Like, I think I went to that studio sometimes twice a day for over a year. And then I enrolled into a local teacher training program, and graduated with like my first 200 hours. So it was a quick whirlwind tour, before I became a teacher, but
Mhm.
it was definitely meant to be.
Yeah, that's so inspiring to hear. I love that. And I'm curious then for you, like, what was the process like between, you get this teacher training and then starting to teach, quitting this corporate job that's stressful? What was kind of that juggling act like as you did that?
So there was quite a few things kind of happening in that time period. Um, I I was seeing someone new in my life at the same time, and that him and I, who's now my husband, had really both loved yoga. And within that time period of finding yoga, deciding I was going to teach it, I also became pregnant. So it was almost this blessing, because I left the corporate job within that time period on a maternity leave, never to return. So it was sort of like all of these things sort of fell into place that were meant to happen in order for me to move forward. you know I didn't have to, like, formally quit. I just sort of went away on my maternity leave and never came back. And at the same time, I was like studying yoga, practicing yoga, being pregnant, and it was kind of like a whole mixed bag of things that were all amazing at the same time.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff happening all at once. I mean, stepping into motherhood, shifting careers, and it does sound like, though, it does kind of make sense because I think, I haven't had children yet personally, but from what I've heard, it's like entering that place of motherhood is, a transition period. And it kind of makes sense that you might transition your career during that period of time.
Right. Yes, for sure. For sure. And then, so great to know that, I can still cultivate what I was learning the whole time I was pregnant, and, thereafter, like being home with her, was a great opportunity for me to keep studying and keep learning and expanding my awareness of the field. So it all really worked, hand in hand. And then when she was 2, we moved and began building studios on our property in Whitby, Ontario. So I never actually, I taught at a local gym for a while, but it wasn't actually for that long. Majority of my teaching was done in my own space.
Okay, that's interesting. And what was it about the studio model that kind of like when you stepped into the world of teaching, like what was it about owning a studio that you were kind of like, yes, this is the direction I want to go?
That's a good question. I mean, I just knew that I could offer people a lot. And I wanted to do that in my own house and create my own environment and community how I saw it. Nothing against working for other people, but I think that it's inbred in me to cultivate and lead. So I was answering a call, like a life call, by making that decision.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm curious, like, what were the logistics of starting your business out of your home? Like, did it kind of go the way you'd envisioned it, or what was it like having this studio? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like, we renovated a barn that was on the property.
Oh,
So the
that's cool.
original studio, yeah, it's super cool. It has such it's still I mean, has such great energy. And the top is a loft-like studio, and the bottom floor has, like, treatment rooms for Reiki and, bathrooms, reception area, that kind of thing. We also have an outdoor studio, so it's all like screened in, so you can practice looking out at the backyard, which has beautiful old trees and like a pond and things like that. And then we also have a Japanese style studio on the property, which is mainly where I teach out of, and it's has beautiful like water features around it, and it's a really really beautiful inner space as well. So I mean, lots had to go on for that to happen. Lots of building, um, things like that, and then a couple of years ago, so we had those spaces for 8 years, and then 2 years ago now, I think it is, we expanded onto a main road in our local town. So we have a location there where the majority of the business is run now, and we've kind of quieted things down on the home front, which is great for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd be curious to know, like, at some point, does it get, I guess, like a little bit overwhelming to have, cars driving into your driveway at all hours of the day? I mean,
100%.
okay. I'm assuming like you're not teaching all the classes. So it's like, how do you kind of turn off from the studio when, you can see how many people are pulling up and there's got to be that little
You don't.
curiosity.
Yeah, you know what? That will be in a book that I'm thinking about writing someday. Like everything I've learned about owning a yoga studio, and I'll talk about that. And it's one thing to be vested in your business, because when you have your own business, you're always like 100% invested and it's always on your mind. But when it's on your property, it elevates the concern and the stress level. I mean, it has its bonuses too. I mean, there's not far to go to work, and it's right there if you need to do something. But it comes with it. There's that light and that dark side of everything. And we did it for a good 8 years and said, okay, we're going to quiet it down and really enjoy our property, and continue to offer yoga, but to do it in a way that's a little bit more easeful for us.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, exactly like you said, I'm sure there's pros and cons. Like the commute is definitely one. I mean, if something goes wrong, you're right there. I would imagine like not having to deal with a landlord is probably pretty great.
Yes, completely. 100%. Yeah, for
You don't
sure.
have to get approval to like paint the space or fight over rent amounts or anything like that when you're your own landlord, which I think is probably a huge bonus. I would love to know, with this other space that you have in downtown Whitby, what was kind of the experience like opening up like another location in terms of how things went for the studio?
So what we ended up doing is purchasing. We actually own it. So it was a home before, and we renovated that. So it's two levels. It's got like a large studio on top, and then a smaller studio on the bottom with the reception area. But I mean, that was a journey in itself, because there was so much that went into the renovation process of that. We had to lift the building. There was all of these regulations that had to come into play. So it was a task in itself to get that up and running, but it's beautiful and it's clean, and it's a great space for the community to practice. It's really really nice.
Yeah, that's a great idea too, to buy a property and then to
Yeah,
convert it
yeah.
into a yoga studio. That's really cool.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And then you're just eliminating the landlord stuff, and a lot of the worry and concern that comes from, having something where you're putting so much energy into it, and you don't own it at the end of the day. So it's a good business plan for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a studio that I worked with or that I taught at when I lived in Atlanta. I lived in Atlanta, Georgia for a year. My husband had a job down there, and it was a new studio. It opened up and beautiful location. And then within the first, I guess, year, the person who owned the building, who was kind of above where the studio was, just said, like, I need you out, with basically no
Oh
notice. And the
no.
studio owner, I was gone by this point because I had to come back to Canada because my husband's work visa was up. But I was watching it and following it on Facebook, and she's moved 3 locations now just because of, kind of these unfortunate landlord situations. And so I think that is
Oh
definitely something to
no.
consider when you go into studio ownership, like not just the
Yes.
location and the price and like the vibe in there, but also like who you're renting from.
That's right. Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yeah, and so I'm curious. I mean, you have all this different studio experience, having, these different locations and running them in different ways. I'm curious, like for people who are listening who are perhaps considering studio ownership, what are some of the key things that somebody should know before they dive into owning their own studio?
So, I mean, to have your goal set, like the vision that you want to have happen is really important. Getting clear on what this means to you and what you're giving to the world in the same essence. So, I think getting clear on your goals and how you're going to get there is the first step. If you're fulfilling a deep need inside of you to own a studio, it usually will take care of itself, but I think that it's important to understand the steps you're going to take to achieve the ultimate goal, whatever that is. I think that, there's so much to consider. Um, what is the what does the studio stand for that you're going to create? What are you bringing out into the world? What are your teachers going to be like? What are you looking for in a teacher? And how is that structure going to happen? Those kinds of things. And then, like we just spoke about, if it's possible, right? Like instead of renting, like getting into some sort of a like mortgage where you can actually own your space and really keep giving back to yourself at the end of the day. I mean, that's so important too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, paying yourself is huge. Like being able to
Yeah.
make sure that you're getting paid for all your time and hard work, I think is a huge, huge thing that's so important as a studio owner.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So true. I mean, there's so many different there's so many different things to owning like a yoga business. I think it's important to eventually have like a teacher training program, because that is going to fuel your business really like from the ground up. So you're going to have people come in who learn how to teach yoga from you. That's going to provide a large amount of income to help the studio, and it's going to foster growth with students and people that they know, and ideas for community through that program. I think that without teacher training, it can be difficult to be really successful in a yoga business.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely something that I've heard before. It's definitely not the first time I've heard that. And I think that it is interesting to think about because, a lot of people will say like yoga is so expensive. And then you think like, oh, well, yoga teachers need to be paid more. Like they need to be compensated fairly, which I 100% agree with. But it's like you've got to think about all the things that go into something. So it's like when somebody pays $20 a class, it's not like, there's still rent, there's utilities or
Oh,
your
there's so
mortgage.
much involved.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
cost of
there's
your
there's so
management
much.
team, your accountant, your lawyer, your
Right. Yeah.
marketing, your
Yeah, there's a whole
software.
other side. Yeah, and then how about just the stress of like managing all of the different energies and things like that? That's hard too. It's a lot to be a studio owner. My heart goes out to every single studio owner because I've been there. I'm still in it, and I know how difficult it can be. I think one of the things that I think is so important is to really learn not to take things personally, and to just kind of separate yourself from um, like how you feel about someone and the business side of someone. That's been like my biggest lessons is really, being completely involved but detached from outcomes and, how people show up and things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine that's like extremely hard too when you've got this like emotional investment in your business because it's not just, the numbers and the amount of people coming through the door and like the rent costs. Like there's going to be an emotional involvement in your studio and you want things to go a certain way. But then at the same time, it's like you're managing all these teachers, your staff, trying to balance everyone being happy, making sure that everyone's compensated. It's just like, I feel like it's a
It's
lot to
hard.
do as one person.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. That's why I keep thinking about that book, because I think it would really help a lot of people, down the road.
Yeah, I think there's a whole side of studio ownership that a lot of people don't consider. And I think specifically it is, these kind of background things that we've continued to list off over the last couple
Yeah.
of minutes. Like, I think that people do think about, okay, I can control my own schedule. I can have my own space. I can create the vibe. I can bring in and cultivate my own community, which all those things are 100% valid and true. And those are the beautiful sides of getting to run your own studio. But then it's like you said, managing energies, managing people, managing money, managing,
Right. Yeah.
clean bathrooms, like making sure that things
Oh,
are nice and
totally.
tidy for people.
Yes. Yeah. It's definitely a labor of the heart. I think yoga business owning is, because I think that, and I know I went into it with these, huge intentions, and I didn't really separate the fact that, at the end of the day, it's a business. So yes, it is a spiritual practice, but what I'm offering is a business. And with that comes regulations and rules and conduct. And that's the issue, I think, when you own a yoga business, is the lines get blurred. They get blurred for not only the owner, but for the students who come, the teachers who teach there. There's this fuzziness that goes on. So it's really important to develop like sacred boundaries around what your intention is, what you're gifting the world, and also the three-dimensional aspect of that, which is reality around owning a business. So it's just an interesting dynamic, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Would you be willing to share like some of the boundaries that you've set in your business that kind of help you maintain, I guess, boundaries and sanity and
Yeah,
clarity and
yeah.
stay true to those intentions?
What I ended up doing is hiring a studio manager. Like my first studio manager, I believe, was 3 or 4 years ago now. Because I was managing absolutely everything: yoga teacher training, signing people in, teachers, payments. Like for 8 years, I pretty much did everything by myself, running 3 studios, and I had a small child and of course a husband. So um, it really weighed on me. And at the same time all of this is happening, I'm doing my own personal work, so I'm growing, as the studio grows. And sometimes, with great triumphs, and sometimes with a lot of like painful times. So it was really, I found, those 8 years to be extremely heavy in many different ways. But once I released control, because it's all about you at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like the people come in and they show you different sides of themselves, and you may get triggered and you may have realizations, but at the end of the day, they're all there for your learning. So once I recognized that I had to release control of everything that I was trying to control, things started to get a lot easier for me. A lot of the pressure came off of my shoulders. And since that day, I've been detaching more and more from the day-to-day workings of the studio. Now I still, am involved in meetings, and I still am, the head of what I'd like to see happen, and I still teach and things like that. But the pressure around me has subsided like a lot. So I think that if you can, hiring some sort of an administrator to help you with the day-to-day things is going to take a lot of that pressure off of people. I also think that, it's important to adapt that rule I mentioned earlier, not taking things personally, and, recognizing when something comes into your awareness, what the learning is there for you so that you can absorb it and learn from it and then move on. It's also super important to, as a studio owner and as a teacher and as people in the world, but to do a lot of self-work. So to do like a daily spiritual practice where you're strengthening your resilience inside so that the outside world doesn't bother you as much, because you have that inner strength inside of you to know that, you're okay, you're strong, you're doing all the right things, you're putting your truth out there. And those other things that come up day to day to day just won't bother you as much, and eventually they'll fade away, which is where I am right now, which is a really great place to be. Do I still get triggered by things? 100%, but so much less so than if I were to have this interview with you like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So there's quite a few things there that are really important. But I hope that helps. I think it will.
Yeah, I think that that's really good information. And I know from other studio owners I've talked to too, like one of the biggest things that they've said is like, getting help with whatever you need. And I think, if that's hiring a karma team to help clean, if it's hiring studio managers to help you manage the tasks that are a burden on your time that somebody else could do, if it's hiring an accountant so that you don't have to do your taxes yourself, which I think as a business owner, it's so important to have that unless you are trained in that. But it's those things that
for sure.
I think it's hard as we're building a business too, because there's always this like consideration of financials. But I feel like for me, I'm a firm believer in investing in the help that I need so that I have the opportunity to grow, because we can't grow when we're kind of just treading water in place.
That's right. It's so true. It's so true. I mean, everyone has limits, right? Like there's a limit to what you can take on, and eventually it expires.
Totally. Yeah, 100%. And I think too, sharing about the spiritual practices is super helpful, because I think sometimes it's easy to disconnect from why we came to the practice or what we loved about the practice and why we decided to start that business, whether or not you're, teaching or owning a studio. And those practices are like, they have to be the root of everything that we do. Like they have to, for us to, I think, run good heart-centered businesses. But sometimes it's so hard when you're in the thick of it.
Oh, completely. That's why it's your energy, your health, your mental state is going to affect everything around you, not just your family, but like your business, so it's a priority for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things I'm curious about is I know you kind of did this transition, right? As, stepping into motherhood. How do you kind of balance, I guess the roles and obligations of being a mom with being a business owner?
It was really difficult. I can't say that I have great advice around that. I mean, I think I did my absolute best to build a business from the ground up and have my daughter Cecilia with me. I mean, I brought her in as much as I possibly could, to the studio when I'm doing things and teaching and just different aspects of it. She was always around and always present. So I think that's important to try and draw in your child to the yoga world. So like if you have a baby, like maybe offering like mom and baby, things that can merge the two of you together while you're trying to build it is really important.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice. Like thinking about kind of what you need and being able to offer that in your business. I mean, that's such a blessing of running a yoga business for sure. I mean, it'd be way more difficult if you were like an accountant, say. I feel like nobody's into like taxes and babies.
Yeah. No, that's totally right. You're right. Like that's the benefit of the yoga. I mean, you can bring, because yoga is to bring together, it's to unite that which has broken apart. So, bringing in your children into the business is amazing for them. It's amazing for you, and it's fabulous for the bond between you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a good yoga teacher friend, and I was on a call with her the other day, and she's got, because of the quarantine, she's got her kid at home right now, and her little girl's 4. And we were like, what do you
Oh,
want to be when you grow up? And she's like, I want to be a mom and a yoga teacher. I was like,
I
that's
love
so
it.
cute. Yeah, I
That's
was like, you're
so
doing something
cute.
right with her.
Oh, totally. For sure. For sure.
It's super
Aw.
cute. She's just grown up in this like little yoga world. So I think there's like
Oh, yeah.
definitely, perks to having a kid while running something like running any type of yoga business for sure.
Yes, for sure. Most definitely.
And so something that I think has been really interesting is, speaking of this quarantine is, we're in this global pandemic, which has changed the game for all industries. And it's been a very, very weird time to be a business owner and to be working in the yoga industry. And I'm definitely counting my blessings that I work in a space that has been able to transition online, as bumpy or as smooth as that transition has been. And I'm curious, like from your perspective as a studio owner, what have things been like over the last 2 months as we've been kind of navigating this
Yeah.
sort of weird
Yeah.
world that
Weird
we're in?
time. Weird time in the world. It's a weird time, but it's most definitely an interesting time for light workers, I believe,
Hmm.
because it is an opportunity for us to dive deeper into who we are and what our obstructions are in the world. And that's what I've been doing over the past few months. And I am so grateful for the time that I've had to dive deeper into who I am and what my goals are, and what I want to achieve. And, it's interesting, Amanda, because for me, I've always wanted to take my business online. I've been talking about this for a few years now. So when the virus, there was the first, initial fear around it, and the studio closed, our teachers offered a few free classes a week for 2 weeks to the community. And during that time, I was working with a company to bring my business online. So it's been online for almost 2 months now, and it's literally a virtual studio that's been transitioned. So we have live classes. We've got, every day we've got a different class in the morning, a different class in the evening, meditations. I've got something called rituals on the site where I'm slowly building up different practices that people can do at home to shift the energy of themselves and the environment that they live in. I'm going to take my teacher training online. It's been awesome for me. Like, and I know that's doesn't sound, like the right thing to say, but it has really helped me expand in a time of contraction.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot of sort of weird feelings that are attached to this idea of having some success through the pandemic. And I totally get it. I mean, I've felt that myself. Like, if anything, I've become busier over the last couple of months, which feels weird because I don't want the world to be in this situation, of course. But I think it is really nice to have like silver linings and, little pieces of hope and glimmer. Like we need that right now more than ever. And so I think that it's amazing that you've had some success with this. And I think it's also really interesting to just hear and see, for so many teachers, so many studios, going online has been something that they've talked about for ages. I have a couple different people that I work with who are like, oh, I created that YouTube channel that I've been talking about for the last year in like 12 hours because now I have to because I
Right.
can't teach in studios. And, even for the studio that I work with here in Canmore, we've had this Vimeo channel with a couple of videos on it for our members for like a couple years now, but it's just never been a priority to record. And now we have like hundreds of videos on there because we're running 32 classes a week all recorded, all online. So
Wow, that's amazing.
yeah, so it is, obviously there's a lot of devastating stuff happening in the world right now, but I feel so much inspiration hearing, somebody like yourself say like, I'm doing this thing that I wanted to do and it's working well for my community.
Yeah, yeah, no, it totally is. And it's something that I see like my future in. So, it's I think divine timing is everything, right? Like things happen to people at certain times, and you're given these little cosmic pushes from the universe to advance in different ways. And it's important to recognize the signs, right? And know like, hey, like this is actually great. And it's okay. It's okay to celebrate this a little bit, right? Because it's a lot of work too.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's definitely like, yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I definitely don't want to make it sound like it's easy because it hasn't been easy over here. And I know it hasn't been easy for you. I would love to hear like what you've kind of decided to do with the online studio you've created because I've heard from so many different people who are doing really neat and unique things. Like how have you decided to kind of model your online studio?
So it's basically, it's like a virtual studio. So every single day, you go on to a private group and you see a live class from a teacher and you can have a little bit of interaction with that teacher. So, you're in the energy of that student teacher relationship. We're also doing virtual circles every single week. It's called the Inner Circle, and these are free to members of the community. And we're talking about, life-changing things like mindfulness, how to work with your past, present, and future. Things that are really almost like a group. It's almost like a group coaching call, is what I would call that. And it's awesome. Like we all really love that weekly chat. And then, we're doing things like we're offering free workshops to the members. So the past couple months, I've offered goddess workshops. I teach something called tribal trance flow, and I've been offering that to the community, which is a really powerful way to move and balance your energy system, and then to be able to call things in. Yeah, we're just kind of putting in lots of different offers and things that you wouldn't actually get in a normal studio. Like you're not going to get a weekly. I mean, you might get a weekly like group gathering together. We just never had that at Glow to begin with. And it's free, it's kind of like added into your monthly cost of being a member. So yeah, there's different things that we've tried to do to make it really appealing to people.
Yeah, I love that. I think it is interesting to kind of think about. I love the idea of doing like an inner circle and have people come together. I mean, people need community more than ever right now. And I think that that's a really beautiful way to support your community and your members. And it is interesting to think about like, not to say that it couldn't work in person. And you'll have to let me know if you do decide to do this once we can be back in person. But I feel like there's, prior to this, there was a big sort of like, I guess, worldwide vibe of like, I'm busy. I'm so busy. I have so much on the go. And
Yeah.
I'm 100% guilty of that. And I just think about like my own sort of personal thoughts and feelings. And I feel like, an inner circle is something that I would definitely be going to right now because I don't have, social events and stuff. Whereas before a couple months ago, I feel like that's the type of thing where I'd be like, oh, it's such a cool idea. But, I've got a birthday party or a wedding or like a bachelorette party, or I'm hanging out with friends, I'm going out for dinner, I'm going to coffee, blah, 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 so much
Oh,
stuff.
I know. There's always something. I mean, we talk about this, me and my friends. It's like, how busy were you 2 months ago? Like my husband and I were traveling, we were back for a bit, gone for a bit, running here, running there. And now it's like, okay, that stuff's all gone. So what can you do to really get into yourself, and explore and build your prana, build your energy system. And I think that it's just, especially during this time, it's important to keep your vibe high.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard. It's hard work too, some days. I mean, I think for me, it's been like a total emotional roller coaster. Some days I wake up and I forget that there's like anything going on outside of my own little bubble. And then I remember and I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. Then other days it feels like the sky is falling down. So yeah, I think it is so important to have that.
Yeah, and I think there's the collective that a lot of us are picking up on too, like the collective vibe, right? And just noticing that some days it might not be you, it just might be in the air. And then, what do I do to lift myself up a little bit here? Right? It's that whole like contemplation awareness thing.
Absolutely. And so I'm curious, like from, building a yoga studio in your house, building another yoga studio or creating another yoga studio, transitioning online, what have been some of your biggest business lessons that you've learned throughout your career?
Oh, such a good question. Um, don't discount your way to success. That's a good one.
That's a good one for sure.
So a lot of time, yeah, a lot of times, and I myself can speak to this because I've been through it. You want to generate a lot of people coming to your studio, so you might do like a cheap coupon or offer a free class. First class is free to students, but it never really works. You might get a couple students from that, but at the end of the day, those people are not vested in what they're coming for. And there's a different energy that's attached to someone who pays you money or does some sort of exchange with you for your time and your energy. And that's the law of the universe, right? In and out, giving and receiving. So I that was a big lesson for me. I did a few of those deals and I did gain a couple actually of lifetime students, but not enough to warrant the pain around what happens when you launch a deal like that. So, and the same with free. I'm against free. I think that you, as a yoga teacher, as a studio owner, are providing something that is of value to everyone who comes across your path. And you deserve to be compensated for that in some way. So I think that that's an important lesson, the giving and receiving side of the law of the universe, and it applies definitely to owning a yoga studio.
hmm Yeah, 100%. I am big fan of those business lessons for sure. I
Yeah,
always, whenever I teach, any type of, I guess, money concept or money mindset when it comes to yoga business, I'm like, if you don't want to give and receive money, you have to give and receive something. There has to
you
be
do.
something. We can't just
It has to
pour
be
and
an equal
pour from our
energy.
cup and never refill it. It doesn't work.
It never works. Yeah, it's because money is energy, and
hmm
there's a lot involved in that exchange. Um, and so is a service, right? If you're exchanging a service for something, it's the same thing. It's just like it's in a different form. So yeah, I would definitely say that for sure. I would also say that, have a collective vision for your teachers and your studio and make sure everyone's on the same page. So, we could talk for hours about that, but you just want to make sure that the mindset of the teachers is in line with who you are and your energy and what you're looking to achieve in the world.
Yeah, 100%. That's so important. And that's something, I mean, when I work with yoga teachers, I'm always like, you are, when a studio owner interviews you, you're kind of interviewing them as well because you want to make sure it's a good fit both ways, like that it feels like a place where you're going to be at home teaching and you're going to be a good fit with that studio owner. And I think as teachers, it's on us a little bit to make sure that we are a good fit and being honest with that, because sometimes there's really great studios that I'm not a great fit as a teacher for. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with the studio or the studio owner. It's just my energy doesn't align with that, and that's okay. It's okay if we don't fit
It's
into one
totally
place.
okay.
hmm
Yeah. 100%. And that goes back to the other thing we talked about, like not taking it personally and recognizing like it's not really about you. It's about them, or it's there for you to learn something and then let it go. Energy is everything. And energy is, I mean, we are energy. Everything around us is energy. And if we start to really observe the world in that way, we'll start to see things a lot differently.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree with that. That's a beautiful takeaway. So thank you for sharing that one. Is there any other business lessons you want to share today?
I would just say that just developing, like kind of what we touched on before, developing some sacred boundaries for yourself as a business owner is super, super important. And just recognizing, you know, what you can tolerate and what you can't tolerate, and really sticking to what keeps you whole as an individual, and then as the identity that you've assumed in the world, which is a studio owner, one of the identities. Getting really clear on what you believe, what you want, what your truth is, and that will start to project out to the people that work for you and the community at large.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that one. I think that that's so important. And I think that in
Yeah.
general, like as a business owner, I mean, even if you're not a studio owner, but maybe you're just running a small yoga business, having boundaries is so important. This has been one of my big, I guess, like inner works, professional things that I'm working on right now, just setting boundaries with my phone, my email, the work hours I'm working, expectations with other people that I work with and stuff like that. And it's hard work. It's so hard.
It is really hard, it's work, definitely. I think that things are always, shifting and changing. So it's important to have a few steadfast things and then be okay to be in the flow of something, because it might change for you. You might feel differently about it in a few months. But as long as you're doing your work, it gets easier. It gets much easier.
This conversation has been so inspiring, and I've loved chatting with you. I know you have a book, which I have a copy of, which is amazing, by the way. So thank you for that. Can you tell listeners a little
Oh,
bit
thank you.
about your book?
Yeah. Yeah. So I wrote that book as essentially a self-help tool for people to connect to themselves in a deeper way. So there's a reflection piece through it. There's, lots of different ways to cleanse and shift and change your energy. Confidence is really about being able to connect to the truth of who you are. And when we have so many layers of things from the past that still bother us, or maybe things from the past we don't even know are there, that provide like this sort of barrier to connecting to who we really are, it's hard to manifest anything in life. It's hard to reach goals. It's hard to shift and change. So the journal is really about kind of reflecting and contemplating, and then healing things from your past. I have many different schools of like education in the spiritual world. So, I'm an EFT licensed practitioner. So I bring in tapping into that book as a way to clear energy from your meridian lines. I talk about things like, expressing your emotions and how super important that is every single day, to be able to accept how you feel and use appropriate ways to move those feelings through your body so that you can be clear and then, move on to the next thing. I'm also a Kundalini teacher, so I've included Kundalini in different aspects of the yoga flows that I offer. So it's a book that, you can do from beginning to end, or you can just pick up the book and just pick something one day and be like, okay, I'm going to dive into this. I'm going to see how this feels for me, and, try something different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that aspect of it where it's like you could work from front to back, or just choose an aspect that's really kind of calling you in that moment and work through that. So I think that that's really awesome, and just very, very amazing that on top of running these studios, being a mom, being a wife, being, a friend, you've been able to write a book as well.
Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. That's really nice.
Yeah, I'm sure it wasn't easy. So definitely something to be
Yeah,
proud
no,
of.
that's true. That's totally true.
So one of the amazing things about the fact that we can't be in person is that your offerings are all online right now. Can you tell listeners where they can go to find Glow Yoga, how they could practice with you if they wanted to, and all that good stuff?
Absolutely. So you can just go to glowyogastudio.ca, and on the front page is the connection to go online to the Academy. You can also go to carolbaxter.ca, and you can see my book. You can see different programs that I offer. And I also have a link that takes you directly to the Academy. I'm also on Instagram, Carol Baxter Glow, and I'm always posting things on there that I'm up to and what's new and how to feel differently every single day. So yeah, those are definitely ways that I'd love to connect with people.
Amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation today, Carol. It's been awesome getting to chat with you and just learn a little bit more about your studios and all that good stuff.
Thank you, Amanda. I'm so grateful to be on the show. It was awesome to chat with you.
Thank you so much for tuning in for this episode of the podcast. To find links, notes, resources, and everything mentioned in today and all episodes of the show, you can head on over to mbomyoga.com. You can find the podcast and myself on Facebook and social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. And I would love for you to join the private Facebook community, Yoga Business Badasses. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, please make sure you reach out to me at info@mbomyoga.com. And last of all, if you enjoyed this episode of the show, please make sure you hit subscribe and leave a review for the podcast. It would mean the world. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Namaste.